Hello, everybody, and welcome to May's Virtual Speech webinar, Virtual Reality Real Results, How Virtual Speech and Strivr Redefine Soft Skills Training. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Sophie Thompson, co-founder and CEO of Virtual Speech, the leading provider of VR soft skills training. We use simulations and AI-powered role plays to improve skills by 25% in just 10 minutes. So just a quick bit of housekeeping. So we want this webinar to be interactive. So please feel free to drop comments and questions, whether you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube, we will still see them. So please feel free to join in and I'll make sure we ask our guests any questions. So today's guest is Aneesh Kulkarni, Chief Technical Officer at Strivr. Strivr are the leading solution for enterprise XR solutions at scale, having worked with brands like Walmart, MGM Resorts and United Rentals. Aneesh brings with him a wealth of experience in technical leadership, developing consumer and enterprise SaaS products and on-premise platforms for mobile, web and data applications. As the CTO of Strivr, Aneesh has been instrumental in developing and launching new products, optimizing existing solutions and building and mentoring high-performance teams at Strivr. Prior to Strivr, Aneesh served as VP of Engineering at Dremio and App Dynamics and Director of Engineering at NetSuite. So we are very lucky to have him joining us today. Thank you, Aneesh.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Yes, Sophie, thanks for the great introduction. Super excited to be here to talk about the partnership. Excited about this conversation, and
yes.
hopefully this conversation helps people looking at VR or looking at both Strivr and virtual speech. Get a lot of great information that they can take away.
Yes, brilliant. So before we dive into more information about the partnership and what Strivr and Virtual Speech are doing together, I thought it would be good for people to have a bit of background about you and your experience with VR. So if we kind of go back to the beginning, when did your interest in VR start and what prompted it?
Yeah, so my technology experience and background before I was at Strivr was predominantly centered around scalable data and analytics platforms. So business intelligence, collaboration, observability, cloud data lakes, these are some sort of the domains that I worked in. In 2019, I took some time off to retrospect on what I wanted to do next, knowing only that I wanted to do something really, really different. Different in that I wanted to work on a product that, viscerally impacted a human, a user, a consumer. Different in that it has to be a technology that I knew little about. I typically like to challenge myself, put myself in positions where I have to always be learning. Where I can't simply succeed based on what I already know, but to do well, I have to really learn the next thing. Different in that it had to be with a company that was trying to create a category, expand the market with exciting technology. And at the same time, I was reading a number of analyst reports, research reports on predictions for the next wave of tech. And there was AI, there was immersive tech, there was edge computing, there was blockchain, there was autonomous systems, augmented analytics, and a lot more. And immersive technology was the least that I knew anything of on that list. And the more I read about it, the more I thought it was cool. The more I thought about the number of use cases where it could be used really effectively, where it could be the revolutionary shift that we actually needed to drive change in behavior. And then the last piece of the puzzle, someone pitched me Strivr, and I really liked what they were doing, the history with sports, the team, the vision of elevating performance through immersive tech, immersive experiences. It just all sort of came together for me and crystallized, a decision that this is the tech, this is the industry, this is the company, this is the product that I want to spend my energy and curiosity for the next few years. So, I didn't know anything about VR before 2019, but, since then I've learned a lot. I'm super excited, and as excited I was 5 years ago.
Yes, the industry has changed a lot in that time as well. I think you joined at a really good time.
Yeah.
So you've been at Strivr since 2019. How have you seen the industry change in that time?
Yeah, I've observed some really significant advancements and changes. I think there are a lot, but if I say at the top, like we are in the era, I think, of faster, lighter, cheaper VR, and now more broadly XR. Some of the things that I love to highlight are like things like technology advancements, high resolution displays, right? These VR headsets now feature much higher resolution displays, enhancing immersion, wireless. These headsets now don't need to be tethered compared to 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? So they increase mobility, improve the user experience. There's things like eye tracking, allows for rendering, allows for increased performance by reducing the rendering workload, because you can look at something and it's selected, or it knows you're looking at it. When it comes to software and content, there's improved graphics, there's improved realism. You can create an experience now, with less overhead than before of making it look really real. There's better user interfaces and experience, hands-free with no controllers, natural logic gestures for navigation. Then there's market growth. Like VR and XR, have seen substantial growth with gaming to begin with, but now, gaming industry remains a major driver, but there's applications in healthcare, education, and in the enterprise, and they've expanded significantly. And then the last thing I'd say is just, for companies like Virtual Speech and Strivr, interoperability and standards. I mean, it's so important to companies like us as we try to build for, different audiences, different headsets, right? I think it just makes it easier for companies like us to grow and expand and to reach more users when there's standards to build on.
Yes, definitely agree with that. And actually, I think Strivr and Virtual Speech, we both started in 2015. So like both companies have been around for 9, nearly 10 years now, which is just crazy. Right. If I think back to first version of Virtual Speech, and it was on Google Cardboard, Gear VR, Google Daydream. I didn't actually try Strivr in the early days. I think, am I right in thinking that Strivr started off and it was for sports training? I think I saw an article way back when about training NFL players.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Strivr's start in 2015 was as a sports tech, sports training company. We were actually incubated at Stanford. So Derek Belch, who's our founder and CEO, was doing his master's program at Stanford, and as his thesis, he was looking at virtual reality and how it improves the efficacy of quarterbacks on the football team. And that's how they started. For the next couple of years, it was very focused on sports teams, professional and collegiate. That was also sort of like, as it happens with startups and journeys in startups, and you probably know about this better than most, Sophie, there's an inflection point, or there's an event that happens that causes the startup to either expand or pivot or grow. And for Strivr, it was an introduction to Walmart, who saw Strivr in action, was really intrigued by the efficacy of virtual reality when it came to athletics and sports, wanted to see how it could help, train their 1.5 million employees at scale with higher efficacy, lower cost. Did a pilot and a proof of concept, saw great results, and expanded VR to over 4,000 locations, trained over 1 million employees. So that was sort of our entry into the enterprise market, and we haven't looked back since.
Yeah, you came in with a bang, that's for sure. So as some people in the audience will know, we recently announced a very exciting partnership between Virtual Speech and Strivr. So could you tell the audience a bit more about what this means? So for existing Strivr customers, what does this mean for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody heard Sophie talk about, virtual speech and, what they're really good at. And and in terms of workforce development, when it comes to soft skills, leadership, communication, de-escalation, conflict management, presentations, public speaking. And so essentially what this collaboration then means is that, virtual speech is, really great suite of communication and leadership training modules is now available on the Strivr platform. So it offers customers and users seamless access to an even more comprehensive collection of immersive VR training experiences. And the key benefit for customers, I think, is that much broader access, right, to specialized, award-winning soft skills training from like an expert in that field of soft skills training, like a company like Virtual Speech. So I think at the highest level, like that's what the collaboration is just access to customers to a much broader, a much richer, and a significantly effective suite of immersive experiences, especially when it comes to workforce development and soft skills.
Mm-hmm. And so if one of your customers, for example, wanted access to virtual speech, how does that work logistically? Like, is that something that you can turn on for them? If they request it, how would that work for a customer?
Yeah, I mean, I think for existing customers, they'll have access to virtual speeches training modules as part of their content catalog or content library on the Strivr platform, right? Mm-hmm. So, virtual speeches experiences can be added to Strivr's catalog of experiences. Customers can then update existing courses to include individual virtual speech experiences. They can create new courses that have virtual speech experiences, and then they can distribute it to their employees using the Strivr platform. Mm-hmm. So it's really simple, right? And I think if you kind of zoom out, you now have this central catalog of all experiences from virtual speech from Strivr. You're able to curate, create, the best set of courses with the right experiences mixed in based on the learning objective that you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. And for virtual speech customers, if you are an existing customer of virtual speech and Strivr, you can now access virtual speech through Strivr. So you can do it all from one platform. So that will streamline that experience too. So we have started working with a couple of clients already together. Could you talk a bit more about how clients are currently using virtual speech on Strivr?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use an example of a Strivr customer that was specifically looking to expand their content library to address, learning opportunities related to soft skills, communication, and leadership. They were a Strivr customer. They had scaled their XR training programs on Strivr across the company, and they still wanted one platform to provide the best and most seamless experience for each employee and to ensure the highest level of security and compliance, which Strivr had already proven to them. So on the Strivr platform, this customer was quickly able to add the virtual speech experiences to their content library, which already included customized XR content that was built for that customer. This gave them the flexibility to add virtual speech experiences into existing courses to make the courses more effective, or to just make the courses more richer. They were able to create new courses that included virtual speech experiences from that learning catalog. And then ultimately for them, it was all the immersive learning content in one place, manageable on one platform. And then for their employees, it was all accessible via the same interface that employees were already familiar with and like. So when an employee put on a headset, they saw courses that were already in the library that were curated and customized for the customer and for the users. They saw virtual speech experiences and all in the same place, and they were able to log in, enter the interface, start training, exit, doing exactly the same things they did the day before.
Yeah, and I think that's... Oh, go on.
Yeah, sorry. And so if you just think about it, I mean, you probably know, right? I mean, a lot about bringing VR to an enterprise is to simplify the user experience, because for a lot of users, this is the first time they're using VR. So, if they already have a great user experience in using a product that is then sort of a gateway to VR experiences, putting virtual speech as part of that just simplifies it and eliminates the friction.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I was going to say as well, is that anything we can do as an industry to make it as easy as possible for people.
That's right.
And as you say, if people are already used to using the Strivr platform, there's no need to go to another platform. It's easier for both from like an admin IT level, security, as you mentioned, but also from an end user perspective as well. If everything's on one place, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at Virtual Speech, we've worked with over 500,000 people. And I know at Strivr that you've deployed more than 1 million VR training sessions. So between us, I like to think we have quite a lot of experience.
We do.
What's the most impactful way that you've seen VR training used?
Yeah, I think you're right. Between the two companies, that's a lot of training experiences launched and used, and it's pretty incredible. And I think that's what makes this partnership so exciting as well, right? And it's a great question, Sophie, because I think the way you asked it, I think it speaks to the importance of being able to measure and know the positive impact that VR training can have on employee performance, which is essentially eventually just tied to company objectives. So I think a big thing about VR and training in VR is it's replacing an existing way of doing learning, which is 2D or e-learning. And I think customers should always be thinking about how is VR helping, how is it having more of an impact, right? So again, I'll just go with an example, and we'll follow up with some data. A retail banking customer of Strivr is looking to help its associates successfully de-escalate challenging customer situations, and they want to do that because they want to build and maintain customer loyalty and trust. And so these were some of their challenges. How do they improve key metrics like customer satisfaction, customer experience, employee safety? How do they increase the employees' engagement when it comes to learning programs, improves their confidence after going through that those learning programs? How do they standardize and shorten training times? And we should talk about the shortening of training times and the efficacy VR in a bit, while still improving learning efficacy. You don't want to just shorten training times and lose learning efficacy. So they came up with a solution in VR, partnering with Strivr, where learners apply company and industry proven methodology to de-escalate a difficult customer situation involving, like in this case, it was a check hole. And you can imagine that this was a retail banking customer. Provide insights. They were able to provide insights into learner confidence and performance through like verbal fluency scores, behavioral analytics, and then self-assessment scores that the users undertook in the headset. And the impact that they saw from their learning experience in VR was a 34% increase in verbal fluency after training in VR. So much more confident employee engaging with the customer in quite a difficult situation, where typically when you're not trained or you don't have the right amount of training, your performance will drop, right? And then a 95% positive retention sentiment scores after training in XR. So just a couple of metrics, that show that they were able to measure the impact of training in VR and how it helped their learners and the metrics that they were going after.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you mentioned about confidence as well, because that's something where I think VR is very uniquely placed to help with, because you can practice skills on demand whenever you want to. It's psychologically safe. There's no impact on those mistakes. And I know personally speaking from virtual speech, like the whole reason we started was around improving confidence. And now it's about skills and confidence, but confidence is very much at the heart of what we do. So that's one of the metrics that us and our customers track as well. So in terms of like virtual speech training, we know that 86% of our users felt more confident after using virtual speech. 92% of people who wouldn't have even described themselves as unconfident or nervous still said that they improved their confidence. So I think that's a massive thing as well. And is typically difficult to track because, I mean, for example, if you just took something like e-learning, you might become quite well knowledged about the skills in that moment in time, but then you need 6 months later, do you still remember that? Just because you know the skills doesn't mean you're confident at actually playing out those skills. So I think confidence is a huge thing for VR training in general.
I 100% agree. Like, I think confidence is what allows your skills and your knowledge to shine and come out into the forefront.
Yeah, exactly. And what other areas of soft skills training specifically are you seeing a demand for at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, but I'm going to go with the ones that are on top of mind for me. And I know also they intersect significantly with what, Sophie, your company, VirtualSpeech, specializes in and provides professional development courses around. So things like conflict resolution. So again, practice, you brought this up, practice navigating difficult conversations, delivering bad news, resolving interpersonal conflicts at the workplace, with care, compassion, respect, sensitivity, effective communication and presentation skills. Again, back to practice, back to confidence, applying like foundational principles to communicate your thoughts, your expectations, decisions, and goals clearly in various contexts. Empathy and active listening, apply leadership strategies to better assess, authentically acknowledge, and respond to your colleagues, team members' needs, concerns, and emotions. Giving actionable feedback, which is so important in the workspace today. How do you deliver objective, constructive feedback at the right time, in the right way to spark, better performance? Hiring and interviewing, such a key part of what people do in every day in the workforce, right? Whether you're a manager, whether you're an employee, practice, screening job applications, carrying out interviews, in how to ask, questions to assess candidates' strengths and fitness, but also weed out things like bias that you may have before you enter the interview room. Public speaking, I know this is a big part of what you all started off with as well, and still continue to focus on, but how do you apply strategies to deliver speeches with confidence? Again, back to the word that you use, confidence, while learning to calibrate your delivery based on the audience. So these are things that are coming to the top of mind for me, but these also, quite heavily intersect with, what virtual speech builds its courses around for their customers. So, and I think it's sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that we've seen an increase in presentations training, even in the last couple of years as we came out of the pandemic. And something that I heard repeatedly from customers was that because people had got so used to working remotely and I guess presenting like this, that then when they went back to the office, even just standing up in front of like 5 of your colleagues in a team meeting suddenly felt like a big deal for people because they hadn't done it for 2 years and it felt so unnatural to stand up, for example. So it's interesting how quickly we can also decrease in confidence as well for something that people say we're doing for 10 years. Then we had a couple of years where we did it less, and then people like went 5 steps backwards. So if they'd have had VR training during that time, they wouldn't have found that their confidence went backwards.
And the thing about putting on a headset is like, you can get feedback from the software that's, providing that experience. Because oftentimes, like, just looking at how you've done is such a great way of like learning, right? And then, otherwise you typically have to set up a camera, record your presentations. But here, like, you could go through an experience in a headset, and the software that is intelligent can give you feedback as to, verbal fluency. What were you looking at? Were you looking at the right things? Were you looking at the audience? Were you acknowledging them and things like that? So,
yeah. And in terms of things like difficult conversations, we use generative AI to be able to have real time conversations with people as well. So if you are about to, conduct a disciplinary about some workplace misconduct, managers don't enjoy those conversations either. So they can also practice them. And as you said, make sure that they show certain emotions like understanding, listening, empathy, and so on, so that conversation goes in as good a direction as possible for everyone involved. So there's also that sort of thing that you can't really practice. Like, you can't practice effectively outside of VR and generative AI in VR. Sort of questions that you might be asked, like if, for example, you have to, make somebody redundant, like it's very difficult to prepare for that conversation, that person's reaction, the questions you might get asked, whereas in VR, you can simulate any one of those situations.
Right.
So for anybody in our audience who is looking to build a business case for VR, so let's just say there's people watching who heard about VR training, but they haven't stepped into the waters yet. What are the main things that you would recommend for people to highlight when building a business case?
I think for me, it just starts off with just clearly identifying and defining, like, what is your business challenge? What is your objective? What are you trying to improve when it comes to your employee performance? Like, what sort of metrics you've gathered? What sort of metrics you're tracking? The pain points you're trying to solve, and then you look for the solution to the problem. So I think just starting there, clearly identifying and defining the challenge, the objective, the opportunities for improvement. That's a great way to start. I think some other things that you could do after that is to, understand, how VR and XR can help. There's lots of case studies. Go to the VirtualSpeech website, go to the Strivr website. There's a bunch of other sites and research papers where you can start to understand, like, the impact that VR has had in similar situations for other enterprises. And you can look at the data, you can look at the use cases, you can look at the data, and you can see how it can help your organization. I think it's important to get executive alignment very early, including leadership in IT, L&D, and finance, right? And I think, like, the best way to get those people to believe is to get them in a headset.
Yeah.
I know that's a cheesy way of saying it, but get people in a headset, and it's that aha moment that really connects the dots to the people that you're trying to make a case for, to bring this tech in to solve solve some really hard problems.
And just while we're touching on headsets, in terms of headset compatibility with Strivr, which VR headsets is the platform compatible with?
Yeah, so we've intentionally built an open platform because we want to give customers the choice. One of the things that you asked me before, Sophie, was like the trends over the last 5 years, and I didn't mention just the number of headsets that are out there compared to 2015, 2017, 2019. And so over the last 3 to 5 years, we've intentionally set out to build a platform that is open in the sense that it's hardware agnostic, because eventually, even though many of our customers ask us for our recommendations, really customers are now starting to make their own choices. So we support the Pico, we support the Quest, we support HTC, and we started to work on the Apple Vision Pro and support the Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, great. I just thought somebody in the audience will ask us that question, so I thought I'd ask it first. So I mentioned before about, like, generative AI role plays that are now available on Strivr via VirtualSpeech for things like difficult conversations. But how do you see things like AI role plays and just AI integrations themselves impacting learning and development, and more specifically VR training?
Yeah, I think when it comes to I mean, I just think about AI more broadly and how it impacts experiences in a headset. I think especially when it comes to learning and training, I think about personalized learning paths. So just like, using artificial intelligence to understand the user, the role, the skills, and create learning experiences, tailored to their needs, skills, learning styles. AI is really good at learning, right, based on repetitions. And so as an employee practices and gets better, a smart use of AI can start to understand, how the employee learns and start to personalize experiences tailored to their needs. AI is also really good to analyze large amounts of data, right? So you can recommend specific training modules, courses, resources they can go to based on what they've seen or what they've observed of the user's experience in the headset. So that's one, personalized learning paths. Then there's adaptive learning, right? We can adjust. You can use AI to adjust the difficulty and type of content in real time based on the user's interactions and performance. And I think a big part of, like, I don't know about you, Sophie, a big part about me is like, just being challenged, right? It's gamification, even though maybe that's not the perfect word to describe learning, but it's sort of the gamification of the experience that challenges users to go further, right? As they progress. And I think that always keeps learner engagement retention high. Right? Skill gap analysis, like, observing what the user has done in the headset, being able to say, well, this user didn't pay attention, so relax attention to detail. This person, will use a lot of filler words while talking. You could use help with verbal fluency and confidence. So you can start to identify skill gaps and then start to predict how this employee may or may not do in the role that they're being put in. So that's really useful for employers. I think the last one is this enhanced feedback and assessment, right? I think if I think about what LLMs and AI is generally really good at right now, is summarization, is understanding, is natural language processing. So if you kind of think about those three things, like AI can provide real-time feedback and assessments in the experience, enabling like continuous improvement, right? So you can analyze responses to questions, you can provide feedback right away about whether they generally said the right things, right, to some degree of accuracy, and help employees, make corrections in real time, because I think that is sort of like a critical part of learning is if you're told that you can adjust your response or your behavior in that moment, you're going to take a lot away from versus someone telling you the day after that you should have said this or you shouldn't have said that, right?
Yeah. And I think AI helps to build that momentum as well, because if you go to like a training workshop, it may be brilliant, but if you do it for 2 days and never do it again, it's going to have limited utility. Whereas if you have this hyper-personalized adaptive learning that AI can bring to the conversation, then you can build that momentum over time as well.
Exactly.
And I know that something that we have spoken about before as well is around the considerations and like ethical implications and considerations around using AI as well, and how it's important to not shy away from them and actually acknowledge that they exist and actually more address how we tackle them. So how we put guardrails in place, different prompts we can put in the background. So I know something that we have done in the past, for example, is that when we first did integrated generative AI, I was doing a demo with somebody and it was in our interview simulator, and they interviewed for a job as a graphic designer. And this was a woman who was interviewing, and the software defaulted to referring to her as a him. So that was a year and a half ago. So we find out those things. But it was an important lesson that actually there is some slight bias or assumptions made by AI that as humans we can put in different prompts and guardrails to make sure that we eliminate that or minimize it as much as we can. So something that we do, for example, now is removing gendered language altogether to avoid things like that. But that's just one example and one of the ways that we've tackled it. But I know that you also personally and as a company feel the same around AI considerations and not ignoring them and actually thinking how can we work with them to actually optimize the AI input.
Yeah, I mean the things that I mentioned about like enhanced feedback and assessment. I mean, I'm not going to trivialize the problem, but I think that's generally an easier problem than what you just talked about, Sophie, which is guardrailing the AI engine behind the conversation, behind the character that I am practicing with. And I think its companies should invest a lot of time in making sure that it's like sort of the right guardrails, they're doing the right testing, they're analyzing the responses, in real time after the fact, and continue to improve, that character engine that they're building in the back end, over time. I think that's one of the harder problems with AI today, is to prevent, hallucinations, to prevent misinformation, prevent incorrect information, but also keep the character engine on topic and not stray. I think it requires probably the most amount of investment that companies like VirtualSpeech and Strivr have to need to make and should make. Because like assessing a user's response is relatively trivial compared to the gravity of what we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So how can people get started with Strivr and virtual speech? So who is the best person to contact at Strivr?
So we actually have a best email for people to contact at Strivr. It's info@strivr.com.
Okay.
And there are people behind that email aliases. It's not a bot that will get in touch with you and with virtual speech and figure out the best way to get you going. Whether it's a demo, whether it's a proof of concept, or whether you're an existing customer for both companies, then how can we just get you onboarded?
Great, thank you. So steering a little bit away to the future now. So where do you see the future of VR learning?
I mean, that's a great question. I think about that a lot. I mean, I kind of want to go back to, just when you asked me at the top of the conversation, what I see as improvements over the last 5 years. And if I want to start by summarizing what those were, and then because that's a good segue into where I see the future going. Mm-hmm. I think I said we're in the lighter, cheaper, faster, era of VR and XR. I generally believe that, right? High resolution, all-in-one headsets, right? Lighter, better form factors, better design, as Apple entering the market with the Apple Vision Pro and starting to define a new paradigm of spatial computing, which is exciting. Also, which is sort of sets a tone for like belief in the market and in the space. The evolution from VR to XR that's coming through with the headsets, whether it's a Quest 3, with its really improved pass through with the Apple Vision Pro, with it's probably the best in class pass through in the market today. And bringing technology like that into the flow of work. And then the inflection point with the advancements in AI that are not only advancing content creation to expand content libraries, but also making the user experience more contextual, more adaptive, mm-hmm. more personalized. And so where, just if I think about those things, that's to like the summarization of what I think the trends have been for the last 5 years. For me, I think the future of learning and VR learning specifically is how do we make it happen in the flow of work? Like, how do you contextualize it so that I get what I need in terms of a learning experience when I need it in real time as part of my day-to-day, right? I think that has always been a challenge, right? But I think now with XR and pass-through and with AI to provide more contextual information, I think the technology is there to make that a reality. We often talk about Strivr, and I'm sure you all do as well. The best way to learn is to do, mm-hmm. Right? And so, how do we bring that learning into the doing phase of the employee's day at work? Is I think where the future of learning and XR is going to be over the next few years.
Yeah, definitely agree. And do you think that there will be? What do you think it will take to make like XR or specifically XR for learning mainstream? Do you think it is when it can be that inflection point that you mentioned where it's like very frictionless to go from, say, doing your emails to then popping into XR to practice a difficult conversation, for example? What do you think needs to happen for that to become mainstream?
I mean, what you said, you're quite right. I think for VR and XR to become mainstream, I think number one, I think a few things. I think content. I think content has to get cheaper to create, faster to create. I think the content libraries need to increase, exponentially, right? I think if we just compare VR with e-learning, I mean, there's a wide chasm in terms of the amount of content available in e-learning libraries versus VR libraries. So we got to be able to close that gap. But once we close that gap, I think it's the thing that's going to like take it all the way there in terms of being mainstream and at scale is actually that contextualize, bring it to me when I need the learning thing. If that happens, then whether I have a headset on my desk or whether the form factor of the future is just glasses, right? If I have a meeting coming, if I have an interview coming up, then 10 minutes before, hey Aneesh, would you like to take this interview prep? Right, and that's awesome because I can spend 5 minutes in interview prep. I can be a much better interviewer, right? Doing justice to not just the person interviewing for the role, but also the role itself. I'm going to into a one-on-one. It's like, hey, Aneesh, would you like 5 minutes practicing a difficult conversation based on what I see in the meeting subject? So just things like that. I just think about that a lot. It's like just personally when I think about that and what it would mean for me is like that would have me learning continuously every day. So you can't hear you.
I was on mute. Yeah, if you could scan your calendar and it would pick up on those keywords, and then at the moment, for example, I know that I get a notification 10 minutes before a call saying you have this call in 10 minutes. If that notification instead was say 20 minutes before and offered me to practice, yeah, you're so right. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So as we draw our Q&A to a bit of a close and open it up to the floor, something I always ask people at the end of the webinar is, if the audience takes one thing away from today, what would you like that to be?
That's a great question. I think I'll go back to like, just how I responded to like, how do you start to implement VR? So I'll just kind of use something similar. Like just educate yourself on the impact that VR can have on your organization, but start with identifying the objective, the challenges that you have with current learning methodologies. Identify what metrics you're looking at improving. Research XR and VR, looking at different companies, case studies, reports on efficacy. And then, I think like just try it out yourself. I think like if there's one thing that I want people to do on the audience today that haven't tried VR, is to just try it out yourself. Like there's no better way to see the potential than putting yourself in the headset and going through a 10-15-minute learning experience in a topic that you feel like you want to get better at. Mm-hmm. And then this is me putting my sales hat on, even though I'm not a salesperson, but contact VirtualSpeech and contact Strivr and get a demo.
Yeah. Definitely. It's a great way to end our discussion there. So I'm going to go to some questions from our audience at the moment. So Philip has asked, who is giving the feedback? Is the AI set to give proper feedback in terms of rhetorics? Does it constantly learn, and hence will it learn from all users that practice? So in terms of the way that we do it and therefore work with Strivr doing it, it is AI giving that feedback, and we have built in common learning design frameworks into those prompts. Customers can also customize those prompts so that it's specific to each unique company's requirements. So for example, if you were doing sales training and your company uses, say, the MEDDIC framework, that, for example, we haven't loaded in, but we can load that in for you. So if there's certain keywords that you like your salespeople to use, we can make sure that they use them and give feedback on them. The last part of your question, I think, is really important, actually. Does it constantly learn, and hence will it learn from all users that practice? The software that we use, anything you say to it will not be used to train a large language model. So that's around like confidentiality, really. So it's not going to be used to train it, and then other people on VirtualSpeech and Strivr platforms will then be able to use what you've done. It's all entirely separate in that respect. Thank you, Philip. So the question is, are there any proven statistical benefits to VR learning? Not sure how to demonstrate the potential ROI and not just jump into new tech hype. That's a good distinction to make. I know that back in, God, when was it? 2021, when there was like, when metaverse was like the word of the year, there was a lot of jumping on the hype wagon. So Aneesh, would you like to share some stats? Otherwise I can jump straight in.
Yeah, I mean, there are some there are benefits proven through academic research, through industrial research, with proof of concepts, pilots, or even just like using VR at scale. We certainly have a lot of that information. But here I just read off some, stats from 2021, 2022. I think it was a report by PwC. Users train 4x faster than in the classroom. So just based on data available before and after. 275% of the users felt more comfortable to apply skills learned after training in VR as opposed to outside of VR. 3.75 X people, felt more emotionally connected to the content than classroom learners. So it talks about it, engagement, retention, right? And then 4x felt more focused than their e-learning peers. So just some stats by, PwC, which is a large sort of, analyst house. But then, we are seeing enterprises that are seeing real impact. And this is not just related to soft skills, but it includes soft skills, 81% increase in efficiency. A customer reduced onboarding time from 4 hours to 45 minutes. So you can translate that to things like soft skills, presentation, leadership training, management training, de-escalation. If all these things are part of your onboarding training for new hires, you can look at reducing onboarding time, which is translates to material dollars as people can get up to speed and wrap up really quickly. Right, employee engagements, 97% felt more prepared for situations where they're in a conflict, and then 88% felt more confident in assessing workplace situations. So these are all real customer stats, and the previous one was from PwC.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't think I have anything else to add there. So yeah, there are industry research, even university research papers on this kind of thing. I know that PwC one was focused on soft skills specifically, actually. So that one's a really good one that you can read. But then also, if you go on the Strivr website, the Virtual Speech website, you can see stats specific to various different use cases. So I know at the start you mentioned about your work with Walmart. I know that's a case study on your website, for example. We've got a case study on our website with Deutsche Telekom.
Right. That's right.
And all of those have stats there too. So definitely worth taking a look there. Okie dokie. So thank you very much again, Aneesh. If anybody wants a demo, info@strivr.com, or reach out directly to me or Aneesh, and we will help you out with that. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.